everyone, and welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be tackling something I know a lot of you are curious about, and honestly, it's a topic that really surprised me when I first started learning about it, so I'm excited to dig in. We're talking about viscose.
Viscose. Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
It is. It's one of those fabrics, it's got that luxurious sound to it.
Right, right. Like, oh, my new sofa's covered in viscose.
Exactly. It sounds really fancy. And it's showing up everywhere, especially in home decor, drapes, upholstery, rugs, you name it. But is it really all it's cracked up to be?
That's the question, isn't it?
Well, lucky for us, we've got some great insights from the Cleaning and Restoration Science Institute, or CARSI, as they're often called.
Those guys really know their stuff.
They do, and they've got this great piece breaking down everything viscose, and I have to say, some of it was pretty eye-opening.
Well, let's get into it then. A lot of people are initially drawn to viscose because, well, it looks a lot like silk, right? That beautiful sheen, that soft drape.
Totally, and the price tag is usually a lot nicer than real silk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that I think trips a lot of people up. Viscose isn't actually a natural fiber like silk or cotton. It's something else entirely, something called regenerated cellulose.
Okay, regenerated cellulose, that sounds a little intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. What exactly does that even mean?
I know, right? It sounds very sciencey, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Imagine taking wood pulp, like what paper is made from, breaking it down,
Yeah.
and then basically reassembling it into these soft, often shiny fibers.
Oh, okay, so it's like recycled wood almost?
Kind of. It's more complicated than that, of course, but that's a good way to think about it.
Wow, that's fascinating. No wonder they market it as bamboo silk and all these other fancy names.
Yeah, and I mean, it kind of is a type of silk, but not in the way people might initially think.
Right. Okay, so we've established that viscose has got this kind of cool origin story, even if it's a bit more complex than it might seem at first glance. But let's talk about why it's actually appealing beyond, that initial ooh, shiny
Yeah,
factor.
sure.
What are some of the actual benefits that might make someone choose viscose?
Well, one of the big ones that a lot of people are drawn to is the fact that it is biodegradable,
Oh, absolutely.
which is huge. We're all trying to be a little bit more mindful of the environment these days. And,
Mm.
when you compare that to some synthetic fabrics that can last in a landfill for like, who knows how long, years and years and years.
Viscose kind of feels like a breath of fresh air, right?
It does. It does. And, I think at the end of its life, it's definitely a good thing. But, it's important to remember that a product's life cycle is a whole story, right? And the beginning of viscose's life cycle can be a little bit, well, it's energy intensive. Let's just say that.
Oh, okay, so it's not all rosy then.
Not exactly. I mean, it's not as simple as, biodegradable equals perfect for the environment. There are other factors to consider, like how much energy is used to make it and what kinds of chemicals are involved in the production process.
Okay, so it's a little more nuanced than meets the eye.
Exactly. And speaking of things that are a little more nuanced than they might appear, let's talk about trice for a second. Because one of the big appeals of viscose is that it's often much more affordable than other options,
Mm.
especially compared to something like silk.
Right, which is obviously a big selling point for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I get it. Who doesn't love a bargain?
Yeah.
But we have to kind of think about how that plays out in the long term. I mean, okay, the initial price tag might be lower, but how long is that viscose sofa going to last compared to, say, a high-quality leather sofa or a really well-made wool rug?
That's a really good point.
Right. I mean, some of those materials can last a lifetime if you take care of them. Will your viscose pieces still be looking their best in 5 years?
Yeah.
10.
Okay, so now you've got me thinking about the cost per wear, essentially. Like, how much am I actually getting for my money over time? And that brings us to what I think might be the biggest question mark when it comes to viscose, and that's durability.
Yeah, the big D word.
Right. The CARSI article we're looking at today really didn't hold back on this point either. They called it out as a major concern.
Yeah, they didn't mince words, did they? But they're right, and it all goes back to those regenerated cellulose fibers we were talking about before.
Right, because we were saying how those fibers are kind of like making paper chains.
Yeah, and they feel soft, sure, but they're not as inherently strong as other natural fibers like cotton or wool, right?
So for someone like me who, okay, maybe spills things occasionally, maybe trips over furniture sometimes, what kind of everyday wear and tear should I be worried about with viscose?
Well, let's just say it's not the most forgiving fabric when it comes to accidents. Even normal foot traffic can actually cause damage over time. Those fibers can crush, they can break down, and that can lead to matting. where the fabric kind of gets all the...
Flattened and kind of loses its luster.
Exactly. It loses that luxurious pile and that soft feel, and then spills. Well, spills can be a real headache. Water in particular is not a friend of viscose.
Wait, really? Just plain old water can damage it? I mean, I get red wine, but water.
I know it sounds crazy, but it comes down to the structure of those cellulose fibers again. They are incredibly absorbent, so when viscose gets wet, it can weaken the fibers, and that can lead to shrinkage, warping, and even those dreaded watermarks that are almost impossible to remove.
Oh, no. So let's say I do have a little spill on my beautiful viscose rug. What's the best course of action?
Okay, so first of all, don't panic. Act quickly. Blot up as much of the spill as you can with a clean cloth, and try to avoid rubbing it, because that can actually push the liquid further into the fibers.
Got it. Blot, don't rub.
Exactly. And then regular vacuuming with a brush attachment can help keep dirt and dust from settling in too deeply, which can also contribute to wear and tear. But honestly, for any serious stains or any major cleaning, you're better off calling in a professional who specializes in delicate fabrics.
So this is not the fabric to experiment with DIY cleaning hacks on.
Probably not. And that's something else to factor in, right? When we're talking about the overall cost, it's not just the initial price tag, it's the maintenance, the potential cleaning costs, all of that.
It's like having a high-maintenance friend. You love them, but they can be a little bit demanding.
Yeah. Exactly. A little bit higher maintenance. And speaking of things that can be a bit high maintenance, remember that whole environmental impact thing we were discussing earlier? Well, there's a bit more to unpack there, too.
It is a little bit ominous sounding, isn't it? All this talk about chemicals and things. And I know one of the things that CARSI mentioned in this piece was that some countries have actually banned viscose production altogether because of the environmental and health risks.
It's true, and it's a complicated issue for sure. But a big part of the concern comes down to the use of some pretty heavy-duty chemicals in the production process.
Yeah, the article specifically called out something called carbon disulfide.
Right, carbon disulfide, that's one of the big ones. And well, it's not exactly something you want to be exposed to on a regular basis.
Okay, so without getting too deep into the chemistry weeds here, what's the deal with carbon disulfide? Why is it such a concern?
Well, in simple terms, it's a chemical that's essential in the process of turning that wood pulp we were talking about into those soft, drapey viscose fibers. But the problem is, it's highly toxic.
Ah, yeah.
And that means there are serious health risks for workers in those production facilities, not to mention the potential for environmental damage if it's not handled and disposed of properly.
So those eco-friendly claims we often see with viscose, they maybe need a little bit more scrutiny, huh?
Yeah, exactly. It's a good reminder that things aren't always as simple as they seem. And it's important to ask questions, to do a little digging, and to remember that our choices as consumers can have a ripple effect.
Well said. So let's bring this back to someone who's listening who might be thinking about viscose for their home. The CARSI article focused a lot on rugs, carpets, upholstery, those bigger pieces where durability really matters. And they also mentioned viscose blends. What's your take on those? Are they any better?
Blends can be a bit of a mixed bag, so to speak. It really depends on the specific fibers that are being blended and in what ratios. Sometimes you might see viscose blended with a more durable fiber, like wool.
Right. To kind of give the best of both worlds, I guess.
Exactly. And in those cases, you might get some of that softness and drape that viscose is known for, but with the added durability and longevity of the wool.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance.
Right. But you really have to pay attention to the blend ratios. If a fabric is, say, 80% viscose and only 20% wool, it's still going to be susceptible to many of the same issues we've been talking about.
Right. Those viscose fibers are still going to be the dominant force in that fabric.
Exactly. And that's why, the article's emphasis on consulting with an expert really resonated with me. Because if you're making a significant investment in a piece of furniture or a rug, it's worth getting personalized advice from someone who really understands textiles.
They can look at your lifestyle, they know the ins and outs of these different fabrics, and they can really help you make the best decision for your needs.
Precisely.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up here, it sounds like viscose isn't necessarily a bad fabric, but it's also not this magical, problem-free solution that some marketing might lead you to believe.
That's a great way to put it. Like anything else, it has its pros and cons. The key takeaway here is to be an informed consumer. Ask questions, do your research, and understand that sometimes those beautiful, luxurious things often have a complex story behind them.
Well said. And remember, true luxury isn't just about how something looks or feels. It's about making choices that align with our values, both ethically and environmentally. So next time you're shopping for furniture or textiles, remember what we've talked about today. Ask those questions, do that research, and make choices that you can feel good about for years to come. And if you've had any experiences with Viscose, good or bad, we want to hear about them. Share your thoughts, your questions, your Viscose triumphs and tragedies with us on our website. Until next time, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.